Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the constant awareness that death prowled just beyond the perimeter of their research station. The Drekker were always watching. "Another peaceful day in paradise," muttered Sergeant Marcus Webb, his rifle never leaving his hands as he scanned the jagged cliffs surrounding their outpost. The human expeditionary force had been on Karnath for 8 months now, maintaining what the diplomats generously called a ceasefire with the planet's apex predators. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's xenopsychologist, looked up from her behavioral analysis charts. "The Drekker haven't attacked us in 6 weeks. That's progress, Marcus. Progress?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "They're 6-limbed killing machines with claws that can slice through titanium. The only reason we're still breathing is because we agreed to stay in this cage they built for us." Leon understood his frustration. The research compound was essentially a prison collection of prefabricated modules surrounded by energy barriers, all positioned exactly where the Drekker had designated. They could observe, they could study from a distance, but they could never truly interact with this world or its inhabitants. The terms were clear. Humans were tolerated as long as they remained contained. The Drekker themselves were magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, standing nearly 12 feet tall on powerful legs, with 4 additional limbs that served as both arms and climbing appendages. They moved through their mountainous territory with the fluid grace of born predators. Their scaled hide ranged from deep amber to midnight black, and their elongated skulls housed intelligence that humanity was only beginning to comprehend. Most unsettling were their eyes, large, multifaceted organs that seemed to catalog every human movement, every breath, every heartbeat. The matriarch made another pass by the eastern perimeter this morning, reported Communications Officer Sarah Chen from her monitoring station. "Same route, same timing. She's establishing a pattern." The matriarch, the humans had never learned her true name, was the undisputed leader of the local Drekker pack, larger than the others, with scarred hide that spoke of countless battles. She embodied everything that made humanity nervous about their hosts. Her presence near the compound was both a warning and a promise. "Cross the line and die, Dr. Rafe," Elena called softly. "You've been studying their social structures longer than anyone. What do you think drives their protective instincts? Why are they so adamant about keeping us away from certain areas?" Leon paused in her equipment check, considering the question that had haunted her research for months. "Territory is everything to them," she said finally. "But it's not just about hunting grounds or resources. The restricted zones we've identified, they all have one thing in common." "Which is?" Marcus asked, despite himself becoming interested. "Elevation and geological stability. Perfect nesting sites." Leon's voice carried the excitement of scientific discovery mixed with profound respect. "I think we're not just being kept away from their territory, Marcus. We're being kept away from their children." The weight of that revelation settled over the team like a heavy blanket. Children changed everything. The Drekker weren't just territorial predators, they were parents, guardians, protectors of something precious and vulnerable. In that context, their hostility toward humanity took on an entirely different meaning. They weren't just defending hunting grounds, they were defending the future of their species. As if summoned by their conversation, a long, haunting call echoed across the valley, the sound of a Drekker matriarch announcing her presence to the world. It was beautiful and terrifying. A reminder that humanity existed on Karnath only at the sufferance of creatures who could end their presence with a thought. Leon returned to her instruments, but her mind was elsewhere, processing the implications of their situation. Trust, she realized, wasn't something that could be negotiated or demanded. It had to be earned, one careful action at a time. And on a world where the slightest misstep could mean death, earning that trust seemed impossible. Yet, as the red sun continued its arc across the alien sky, Leon found herself wondering what it would take to bridge the gap between species. What act of courage or compassion might finally prove that humanity deserved more than mere tolerance? She would discover the answer sooner than she ever imagined. The ground began to shake at 14:47 local time, a subtle vibration that grew steadily stronger until equipment rattled, and the human outpost's emergency alarms began to wail. Dr. Leon Rafe grabbed the nearest support beam as the tremor reached its peak, watching through reinforced windows as rock slides cascaded down the surrounding cliffs like deadly waterfalls. "Magnitude 6.2, reported Sarah Chen, her voice tight with concentration as she monitored the seismic readings. Epicenter approximately 40 kilometers northeast, in the restricted zone." Commander Patricia Reeves, the expedition's military leader, was already coordinating response protocols. "All stations, Report damage and casualties. Engineering. I need a structural assessment of the compound. Medical. Prepare for potential rescue operations. As the shaking subsided, Dr. Elena Vasquez was studying her behavioral monitoring displays with growing concern. The Drecker communication patterns are spiking across all frequencies, she announced. I'm detecting distress calls from multiple locations. This is unlike anything we've recorded before. Leon's scientific instruments were already painting a picture that made her blood run cold. The seismic event had triggered massive rock slides throughout the mountain ranges, particularly in the elevated regions she'd identified as potential nesting sites. Her hands flew across her workstation, cross-referencing geological data with Drecker territorial maps. "Commander," she called out, her voice carrying an urgency that made everyone turn. "The slide patterns, they've hit the nesting valleys. If I'm right about Drecker reproductive behavior, we might be looking at a catastrophe." Sergeant Marcus Webb, ever practical, was monitoring long-range scanners. "I'm picking up movement signatures in grid section 7G3, no, for distinct heat sources. Small ones." He paused, his expression growing troubled. "They're not moving anymore." The implication hit the team like a physical blow. In the rubble of collapsed cliff faces, Drecker cubs, the most protected and precious members of their society, were trapped, or worse. The very beings whose safety had driven the species to isolate humanity were now in mortal danger. Elena's monitoring equipment was capturing an unprecedented range of Drecker vocalizations calls that spoke unmistakably of grief, panic, and desperate searching. "The adult pack members are converging on the slide zones," she reported, her voice barely steady. "But the debris fields are too extensive. They can't reach." "Doctor," Sarah interrupted, her face pale as she processed scanner data. "I'm detecting survivors. Grid 7G. Definitely 3 biosignatures, faint, but alive." Commander Reeves was already running calculations, her military mind assessing options with cold efficiency. "The Drecker will handle their own casualties. Our priority is compound security, and with respect." "Commander," Leon interjected, surprising herself with her boldness. "Those aren't just casualties. They're children. And the adult Drecker can't reach them. Their claws and size work against them in confined spaces." "But we could." The command center fell silent except for the ongoing monitoring chatter. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice heavy with disbelief. "You're suggesting we violate the restricted zones? Risk our entire mission? Hell, risk our lives to rescue alien predator cubs that we've never even seen? The same cubs whose parents have been one wrong move away from tearing us apart for 8 months, added Chief Engineer Tom Rodriguez. "Cubs whose rescue might be seen as an invasion, an attack, or worse." Leon found herself standing, driven by a conviction she couldn't fully explain. "Or it might be seen as exactly what it is, an attempt to save innocent lives." She turned to face Commander Reeves directly. "Ma'am, our xenobiological protocols are clear. When possible, we preserve life. We don't discriminate based on species." Elena was studying her behavioral analysis with intense focus. "The communication patterns suggest extreme distress, but also coordination. The adult Drecker are trying to organize rescue efforts, but they're failing. Dr. Rafe might be right. This could be an opportunity to demonstrate that humanity poses no threat to their young, or it could be the last mistake any of us ever make." Marcus countered grimly. Commander Reeves was quiet for a long moment, weighing options that could determine not just the fate of trapped cubs, but the future of human-Drecker relations. "The regulations are clear," she said finally. "We maintain the boundaries. We don't intervene in local affairs." But even as she spoke, everyone in the room could see the scanner readings, showing 3 small life signs growing weaker with each passing hour. Somewhere beneath tons of razor-sharp stone, Drecker cubs were dying while their parents called helplessly from above. Leon felt something crystallize inside her, a decision that transcended regulations, protocols, and the careful diplomacy of interspecies contact. Some things were more important than rules. Some opportunities came only once. As night began to fall over Karnath's red landscape, she quietly began to formulate a plan that would either bridge to species or destroy any hope of peace between them. The compound fell into an uneasy quiet as the night shift took over monitoring duties. Commander Reeves had made her decision clear: no intervention, no violations of the restricted zones, no matter how compelling the humanitarian arguments might be. The 3 fading biosignatures in Grid 7G continued their slow decline toward zero, while Drecker distress calls echoed across the valleys like a symphony of grief. Dr. Leon Rafe sat in her quarters, staring at the portable scanner sheet, requisitioned for routine geological surveys. Her official logs would show nothing unusual, just another night of standard research activities. But the truth was far different. Every fiber of her being rebelled against the idea of letting innocent creatures die when she possessed the knowledge and tools to save them. She'd run the calculations a dozen times. The debris field was accessible via rover if she took the maintenance route through Canyon 4B. Her emergency medical kit included universal trauma supplies that should work on Drecker physiology. She'd been studying their biological systems for months. Most importantly, the adult Drecker were concentrated on the eastern approach to the slide zone, giving her a narrow window to approach from the west. A soft chime from her door made her heart skip. "Come in," she called, expecting to see Elena, or perhaps Marcus checking on her. Instead, Chief Engineer Tom Rodriguez stepped inside, carrying a modified excavation tool and wearing an expression of grim determination. "Figured you might need some help with your geological survey," he said quietly. Leon stared at him in shock. "Tom, you can't be serious. If Commander Reeves finds out, then we better make sure." "She doesn't," interrupted Dr. Elena Vasquez, appearing in the doorway with a field medical kit. "I've been monitoring the Drecker communications all evening. Those aren't just distress calls anymore, Leon. They're funeral dirges. The pack is starting to mourn." Behind Elena stood Sarah Chen, her communications gear modified for portable operation. "Someone needs to monitor Drecker movements and provide early warning if the adults discover what we're doing," she said simply. "Might as well be me." Leon felt tears threatening as she looked at her colleagues, her friends, who were willing to risk everything based on nothing more than shared humanity and the belief that some acts transcended species boundaries. "This is insane," she whispered. "We could all die out there. Worse, we could destroy any chance of peaceful relations between our species. Or we could save 3 lives and prove that humanity can be trusted with the most precious things in their world." Tom replied. "Seems like a fair trade to me." Elena was already checking her medical supplies. "I've been studying Drecker physiology since we arrived. Basic trauma care should translate stop bleeding, ensure airways, treat for shock. The principles are universal." 30 minutes later, a small rover departed the compound through the maintenance exit, its official logs showing routine perimeter inspection. The 4 humans inside moved through Carnath's alien landscape, guided only by scanner readings and the desperate hope that they were making the right choice. The journey to Grid 7G took 3 hours of careful navigation through unfamiliar terrain. Canyon walls rose on either side like the ribs of some massive beast, while overhead, the planet's twin moons cast shifting shadows that turned every rock formation into a potential threat. Sarah's communication equipment provided a steady stream of updates on Drecker positions. The adults were still concentrated on the eastern approach, their calls growing more mournful with each passing hour. "Thermal readings are getting stronger," Tom reported as they approached the debris field. "Whatever's under there, it's still alive, but barely." The slide zone was a chaos of broken stone and twisted metal, the remains of some ancient structure that had been built into the cliff face. Boulders the size of human dwellings lay scattered like children's toys, while smaller debris filled every gap. The scale of destruction was staggering. "There," Elena pointed to a section where their scanners showed the strongest biosignatures. "Approximately 12 meters down, beneath that overhang. They're in some kind of natural pocket." Leon activated her excavation tools, noting how their mechanical sounds seemed to echo strangely in the still night air. Every scrape of metal on stone might alert the Drecker adults to their presence, but the alternative was letting the cubs die slowly in the dark. Hours passed as they carefully moved debris, creating a tunnel barely wide enough for human passage. Tom's engineering expertise proved invaluable in stabilizing the improvised shaft. While Elena monitored the trapped creature's vital signs, Sarah maintained her vigil, tracking adult Drecker movements and providing updates that grew increasingly tense. "As dawn approached, I can see them," Leon called softly as her headlamp finally penetrated the pocket where the cubs had been trapped. What she saw there would be burned into her memory forever. 3 small forms huddled together, their scales dulled with dust and trauma, but their large eyes still bright with intelligence and fear. They were beautiful in a way that defied easy description, miniature versions of their deadly parents, but possessed of an innocence that transcended species boundaries. One was injured, its breathing labored, while the others pressed close as if trying to share warmth and comfort. "Oh," Elena breathed, reaching the opening behind Leon. "They're just babies." And in that moment, as dawn began to break over the alien landscape, and the sound of approaching Drekker calls grew steadily closer. Leon knew that everything was about to change. The first Drekker cub fit easily into Leon's arms. Its scaled hide warm against her chest as she carefully lifted it from the debris pocket. Despite its alien nature, the creature's behavior was unmistakably that of a frightened child clinging to her protective embrace while making soft, chirping sounds that spoke of pain and confusion. Breathing is shallow but steady, Elena reported, running her scanner over the injured cub. Possible internal trauma. Definitely dehydrated. But the readings suggest they'll survive if we can get them proper care. Tom was already working to extract the second cub, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he navigated the creature's multiple limbs. This one seems stronger, he noted, more alert. Anyway, keep looking at me like it's trying to figure out what I am. The sound of approaching Drekker calls was growing closer, their haunting harmonies carrying new urgency. As the pack apparently detected some change in the situation, Sarah's communication equipment was painting an increasingly tense picture of adult movement patterns. Multiple signatures converging on our position from the east, she reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. Estimated arrival time, 12 minutes, maybe less. Leon felt her heart hammering as she secured the first cub in the makeshift carrier they'd improvised from emergency blankets. Third one, Elena, was already reaching into the pocket, her movements careful but quick. Smallest of the three, but actually seems to be in the best condition, probably protected by its siblings. She emerged with a cub barely the size of a human infant, its proportionally large eyes tracking their movements with curious intelligence. "That's it, we're done here," Tom announced, but his words were interrupted by a sound that froze everyone in place, the deep, resonant call of a Drekker matriarch, much closer than Sarah's instruments had indicated. "She's not on the eastern approach," Sarah whispered, frantically checking her readings. She's right above us." Slowly, as if moving through a nightmare, the four humans looked up to see a massive silhouette against the dawn sky. The matriarch stood on the cliff edge directly overhead, her six-limbed form outlined against the red sunrise like some ancient god of war. For a moment that stretched into eternity, human and Drekker regarded each other across an evolutionary gulf that seemed impossible to bridge. Then the matriarch began her descent. "Run," Elena whispered, but even as she spoke, they all knew it was pointless. No human could outrun a Drekker on open ground, especially while carrying cubs. They were committed now to whatever fate awaited them. The matriarch moved down the cliff, face with fluid grace, her claws finding purchase on surfaces that looked impossible to navigate. She was massive up close, her scarred hide speaking of decades of survival in one of the galaxy's most dangerous environments. When she reached the bottom of the debris field, she paused, tilting her elongated skull as she took in the scene before her. Leon found herself stepping forward, clutching the injured cub protectively against her chest. If these were to be her final moments, she would meet them defending the innocent. "We're not here to harm them," she said aloud, knowing the matriarch couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone might convey her intentions. The matriarch's response was a low, rumbling vocalization that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Her multifaceted eyes studied each human in turn, cataloging every detail of their appearance and behavior. When her gaze fixed on the cubs they carried, something shifted in her posture, a subtle change that Elena's trained eye recognized immediately. "She's not preparing to attack," Elena whispered in amazement. That's a recognition posture. She's assessing the cub's condition." The matriarch took a step closer, then another, her movements now carrying in different qualities, still powerful, still dangerous, but no longer predatory. When she was close enough to touch, she extended one of her secondary limbs toward the injured cub in Leon's arms. The contact was gentle beyond belief, a creature capable of slicing through metal, using her claws with the delicacy of a feather to examine her offspring. The cub responded with a weak but happy chirp, its distress calls replaced by sounds of recognition and relief. What happened next would be studied by xenobiologists for generations to come. The matriarch, having confirmed her cubs were alive and unharmed, turned her attention to the humans who had rescued them. But instead of the aggressive postures they'd observed countless times, she performed a behavior that had never been recorded before, lowering her great head until she was at eye level with Leon. She made a sound deep in her throat that was neither call nor growl. "Elena," Leon whispered, not daring to move. "What is she doing?" Elena's voice was filled with wonder as she replied, I think she's thanking you." The matriarch remained in that position for several heartbeats, her alien gaze meeting Leon's human eyes in a moment of interspecies understanding that transcended language, evolution, and fear. Then, with infinite care, she reached out to touch each rescued cub with her claws, as if counting them, confirming their safety. Other Drekker were arriving now, the rest of the pack drawn by their matriarch's calls. But instead of finding the scene of violence they'd expected, they discovered something unprecedented: humans and Drekker sharing the same space, the same purpose, the same concern for vulnerable young lives. As the red sun climbed higher in the alien sky, casting long shadows across the debris field, two species took their first tentative steps toward a trust that would reshape both their civilizations. And at the center of it all, 3 small cubs served as living proof that some bonds transcend the boundaries between worlds. 6 months later, Dr. Leon Rafe stood in what had once been called the restricted zone, watching as human medics worked alongside Drekker healers to tend to a group of cubs who had suffered minor injuries during play. The sight would have been unimaginable during the early days of contact, when the two species regarded each other with suspicion and fear. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. Following the rescue in Grid 7G, tensions had actually increased as both sides struggled to understand what the unprecedented cooperation meant for their relationship. Commander Reeves faced an investigation by Earth Command for allowing protocol violations, while the Drekker pack engaged in complex social behaviors that Elena's team was still working to decode. But the cubs themselves had provided the bridge between worlds. The integration process continues to exceed all expectations, Elena reported during their weekly briefing to Earth Command. Drekker's social structures appear to have adapted to include humans in what we can only describe as an extended family unit. We're not just allies anymore, we're recognized as protectors of their young. The change in terminology had been gradual but significant. Where once the Drekker had referred to humans using vocalizations that translated roughly to small soft ones who stay away, they now used a complex harmonic phrase that Elena's team had finally decoded as stone fangs who guard the small. The reference to stone fangs apparently related to the tools humans used for excavation and rescue work, while the guardianship designation represented the highest honor Drekker society could bestow. Sergeant Marcus Webb, now serving as liaison officer for Joint Security Operations, maintained his healthy skepticism even as he adapted to the new reality. "Don't get me wrong," he said during a training session with newly arrived human personnel. "They're still apex predators who could tear us apart without breaking a sweat. But now they've got a reason not to. As long as we respect their young and maintain our protective duties, we're family." The concept of protective duties had evolved far beyond the original rescue. Human medical knowledge, it turned out, was remarkably compatible with Drekker physiology when applied carefully. Dr. Elena Vasquez had established the first interspecies medical protocols, while Tom Rodriguez had designed specialized equipment that could assist in Drekker construction projects without interfering with their traditional methods. Most remarkably, Sarah Chen had developed a communication system that allowed real-time translation between human speech and Drekker vocalizations. For the first time in the history of interspecies contact, 2 radically different civilizations could hold actual conversations. "The philosophical implications are staggering," reported Dr. James Morrison, the expedition's new xenoanthropologist. "We're not just sharing a planet, we're sharing child-rearing responsibilities." Human concepts of protection and nurturing appear to translate directly into Drekker's social structures. It's as if we've discovered a universal language of care. The 3 cubs from the original rescue had become ambassadors in their own right. Now healthy and growing rapidly, they showed none of the instinctive fear of humans that characterized older Drekker. Instead, they actively sought out human contact, playing games that seemed designed to test both human reflexes and Drekker hunting instincts. Leon often found herself serving as both researcher and babysitter, a role that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. "They're teaching us as much as we're learning from them," she explained to a visiting delegation from Earth. Drekker cognitive development follows patterns that are remarkably similar to human children, but with accelerated problem-solving abilities and an instinctive understanding of complex spatial relationships. Watching them grow up gives us insights into how their species thinks and learns. The broader implications were already becoming apparent throughout human space. Reports from Karnath had sparked interest from xenobiological teams across the galaxy, leading to new protocols for first contact situations. The Karnath model emphasized patience, respect for native social structures, and the recognition that protecting the young of any species could serve as a foundation for trust. But perhaps the most significant change was visible in the daily interactions between humans and Drecker on the planet's surface, where once the human compound had been an isolated outpost surrounded by energy barriers. It was now the center of a growing community where two species worked together, learned from each other, and shared the responsibility of raising the next generation. As Leon watched a human engineer teaching a young Drecker how to use precision tools, while a Drecker adult showed human children how to navigate cliff faces safely, she realized that they had achieved something unprecedented in the history of interspecies relations. They hadn't just made contact with an alien civilization, they had become part of it. The red sun of Karnath was setting again, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. In the distance, Drecker calls mixed with human voices as both species worked together to secure the compound for the night, and in the nursery areas, cubs of both kinds of families slept safely under the protection of parents who had learned that trust, once earned, could transform enemies into guardians. Humanity had found its place among the stars not as conquerors or explorers, but as protectors of the innocent, and in doing so, they had discovered that the greatest adventures began not with the discovery of new worlds, but with the decision to care for the vulnerable creatures who called those worlds home. The covenant between species was written not in treaties or agreements, but in the simple act of reaching out to protect a child in need. And that covenant would endure as long as there were humans willing to risk everything for the sake of innocence, and Drecker wise enough to recognize that some bonds transcend the boundaries between worlds.